Well, Russia wasn't the only target of President Trump's words. The US president also took aim at the London mayor, Sir Sadiq Khan, during his UN address, calling him, quote, a terrible mayor. Let's take a listen.
And I have to say, I look at London where you have a terrible mayor, terrible mayor. And it's been so changed. Now they want to go to Sharia law. But you're in a different country. You can't do that. Both the immigration and their suicidal energy ideas will be the death of Western Europe if something is not done immediately. This cannot be sustained.
The US president speaking there, while the London mayor, Sir Sadiq Khan, has hit back, calling President Trump a sexist, a misogynist and an Islamophobe.
I think President Trump has shown he is racist, he is sexist, he is misogynistic, and he's Islamophobic. What it is about this Muslim mayor who leads a liberal, multicultural, progressive, successful city that means I appear to be living rent-free inside Donald Trump's head.
The Mayor of London speaking there. Well, to discuss all of this, I'm joined by Jan Halper-Hayes, who's a former member of President Trump's transition team, now based in London. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us, Jan. We're also joined by the broadcaster and political commentator Matthew Stadlen, who also joins us from London. So thank you both very much indeed. Jan, let me start with you. Europe, China, India and Russia were all singled out for criticism by President Trump in that address to the UN General Assembly. So too was the Mayor of London. How did he make his way into the president's speech?
Well, if you had followed Twitter, now X, you would know that they have been having a running social media battle for all of these years. That wasn't anything new. They bait each other. It puts them in the news. Donald Trump is not bothered by negative press because you're still talking about him.
OK, I mean, we're all aware that he doesn't like the London mayor. But, Matt, I mean, isn't it slightly surprising that the Mayor of London should be on the mind of the US president to the extent that he gets a special mention at the UN General Assembly? It's all a bit unprecedented, isn't it?
Sadly, it's not surprising, but it is shocking. This was an important set-piece speech by President Donald Trump, a speech in which he could have called for all sorts of serious improvements to the world. But instead, as you say, he allowed himself to deviate towards a petty battle with the Mayor of London. I'm a Londoner born and bred. I've lived here almost all my life, been abroad very briefly during that period. I love my city. It's a great city. I would argue it's got a very strong case for being the greatest city on the planet. Yes, of course, like any city, we have some problems. But the fact, as you say, that the President of the United States makes time in such an important speech to single out the Mayor of London, and even though he's an important figure, the President is obviously punching down here, I think is really, really dispiriting. And I side unequivocally in this spat with my own Mayor of London, for whom I have voted 3 times. And I wouldn't go as far as to use a word like racist towards the president. What I would say is that there have been things he's said over the many years of him being in public life and in public office, indeed that he is the most powerful human being on the planet, that have been dog whistle calls to prejudice. And I'm afraid I think this is just another example to lambast the Mayor of London and immediately segue into saying they want to bring in Sharia law is exactly the sort of remark you would expect of someone who is Islamophobic. And the thing with what Donald Trump has said here and the playbook of people on his side of the political aisle, not everyone by any means, is deniability. And there's just enough wriggle room in that statement for him to deny being Islamophobic. But if you want to know what my impression of those remarks is very, very straightforwardly Islamophobic.
Okay, Jan, I can see you shaking your head there. What have you got to say to Matt's comments then?
Well, I always find we distinguish between liberals in the US and leftists, and this kind of leftist thinking that does not take historical things, does not understand the game that is going on between these politicians. But here's what these leftists do. Instead of making really serious comments, anything that has any substance, they go to name calling. And so then their followers latch onto that. And here we are on a major news show, and we are talking about petty things instead of understanding what's really going on and understanding that just name calling is not a good retort from Sadiq Khan.
So what is really going on then?
Well, I've been explaining the dynamics of it. And when you have the way the leftists think, oh, well, he criticized a Muslim man, so he must be Islamophobic. That is irrational logic. If you just buy into... I didn't interrupt you, sir, and I didn't comment on yours, so please.
Sorry, you are right now commenting on me, suggesting I am a name caller at the same time as calling me a leftist. And you're saying that I am being petty when it is the President of the United States, the most powerful human being on the planet, who is being petty, and not just petty, but deeply bigoted, in my view, towards a Muslim mayor of my city. So I would suggest that you are, to use that oft-used word these days, gaslighting me and gaslighting every member of the audience to this news show.
Okay, Jan,
Thank you
must
for
let you respond.
My point and accusing me of. I appreciate you validating some of my criticism, because you've gone to name calling of me, and when I made the comment, I didn't interrupt while you were going on. And so I asked you to please not interrupt me. And I often tell people, what is the difference between a shotgun and a leftist? A shotgun only has one trigger. And you told me many of my words triggered you. And that is the point that I'm trying to make.
Okay.
Sorry, I haven't been triggered by you. I've got far thicker skin than you seem to give me credit for. What is the issue here is the behavior and conduct and the language being used by the President of the United States at an important set-piece event, a set-piece speech at none other than the United Nations, and his petty and inflammatory criticism of a Muslim mayor of my city. As I said, I was born and brought up here. I've lived here almost all my adult life. And the idea that we are, or anyone here, is moving towards or going for Sharia law, there is no evidence for that. I'm sure there will be some Muslim members of my city, fellow citizens, who might in an ideal world want Sharia law, and I would reject that. But the idea that anyone in power in London, let alone the Mayor of London, who, by the way, marches in favour of and in support of gay and other minority rights, the idea that he is somehow championing Sharia law is completely dishonest, without any basis in fact. And all you seem to be able to do is accuse me of calling you names, which I haven't done, while call me names such as leftist, when you've never met me before, and I suspect know very little about me in return. It's really poor argument.
I said the leftists. But the thing is that, all right, think back over time since Donald Trump has been a main figure. How many leaders has he outwardly criticized when he has had the cameras on him? And what ultimately ends up happening with their relationship? Either they continue as Sadiq Khan and Trump are, more often than not, they come together. Trump has a strategic strategy. He doesn't do anything off the cuff. So he thought loud and clear, long and hard, and maybe only a couple of minutes, that he was going to make a reference to the mayor of London.
Okay, I want to ask you a quick question, though.
Can I just quickly respond?
Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead, Matt.
To suggest that Donald Trump does nothing, your words, off the cuff, is patently deniable by what happened during this very speech, in which the teleprompter broke down and Donald Trump embraced speaking off the cuff. He is known, as far as I'm concerned, for speaking off the cuff and going off script. To suggest otherwise is patently absurd.
Okay, let me just ask a quick question. I mean, clearly, Jan, London's a very international city, and evidence of that is the fact that you live there, you spend a lot of your time there. And one of the points that the Mayor of London made, Sir Sadiq Khan, he said that record numbers of Americans are actually coming to live in London. I mean, that suggests that, you know, not everyone dislikes the direction London is going in. I mean, what's wrong with the direction London's going in? And I'd love to get your point of view as an American who lives there.
Okay, I would not phrase it as what's going wrong with London. What are some of the problems that the media focuses on and gives people an impression that it could be worse than it is? The one thing has been the knives. Crime has gone up. Crime is a big issue around the globe for politicians to deal with. But I've been here 24 years. My son died here, sadly, and people thought I would leave. I just flew in, and as my ride came home, I thought about how much I love London. Every city has its problems, but even when the media makes a bigger deal about it, it gives people the wrong impression. Now, Americans leaving and wanting to come here, well, I wanted for a long time. I even married a Brit, but most people leave their heart in San Francisco. I left my ex there and took my son and my heart and came to London. I see all the beauty, and I know there are problems, but we can't. And look, there are cities in the U.S. Dearborn, Michigan is under Sharia law. I think there might have been part of the reason that he brought it up was that he will eventually do a comparison between the two cities in Michigan that are run by Sharia law.
Okay.
That doesn't make you Islamophobic.
So
Matt,
sorry,
jump in.
let me respond, if I may. First of all, my sincerest condolences about the death of your son. Secondly, thank you for saying positive things about your city as well as my city, because, as you say, you've been here for over 2 decades, which makes it your city as well. And you're as perfectly able to comment on it and as free as I am to comment on it. And I'm all ears as to your views on it. But I disagree very strongly with some of what you've said. The reason we are talking about London in a negative light, or rather I am having to defend it, and to some extent you have defended it, is precisely because of the targeting of London by Donald Trump and others who might be affiliated to his movement. And I'm very sorry to say that many of the attacks on London seem to be motivated by, inspired by Islamophobia, by bigotry more generally, by xenophobia. And those attacks come from within the United Kingdom and from without. Okay. And if Donald Trump is not going to stand, even Donald Trump is not going to stand at the United Nations in front of the eyes of the world and say he doesn't like Muslims. Of course he's not. But what he has done in those remarks about Sadiq Khan, whether they were off the cuff, those particular remarks or not, is link far too closely a Muslim mayor with a baseless assertion that they are going for Sharia law. And that it offers deniability to the president, which allows you to defend him in a way you couldn't defend him if he simply came out and said he doesn't like Muslims. Now, he may well have some Muslim friends, but if you target a Muslim mayor and effectively tarnish him with the idea that he's trying to insert Sharia law into the United Kingdom, where it has no basis in our legal system and will have no basis in our legal system. I'm very clear that I don't want it to have any basis in our legal system. If you defend the president's remarks, then I'm afraid you are part of that particular problem.
Matt, I've got a question for you, just briefly, picking up on what you're saying.
I just want to respond with one thing.
Okay.
I didn't defend, I explained. And that is an important distinction. I explained because I want people to understand. That is why I'm not willing to critique Sadiq Khan. He doesn't deserve that, but I can explain the historical perspective of the battle for almost a decade that has been going on between the two.
Okay, Matt, I want to pick up on what Jan was saying about knives and the implication being that crime is on the rise in London. That's something we see quite a lot of outside the UK, a lot of clips, a lot of videos suggesting there's a big problem. And I'm told you too have fallen victim to street crime in the UK. Do correct me if I've been ill-informed. Do you blame the mayor for that? Do you agree with the assertion that he is a terrible mayor, as the US president has said, presumably drawing on this crime issue on the streets of London?
So just very, very quickly.
I wouldn't use the word terrible for him.
No, that's what Donald Trump said. President Trump said terrible. That's a question for Matt.
He did, but okay.
Just very quickly, I should emphasize, because I haven't so far, and that's my mistake, that Sadiq Khan has no role in immigration. He has no powers over immigration to this country as Mayor of London. And we should be absolutely crystal clear about that. Decisions about immigration are made over his head. On the issue of crime, as I understand it, homicides in London are at a 10-year low. Now, of course, one homicide is too many in whichever or whatever city around the world. And I want the police to do everything they can within the law to make sure that we have no homicides. As far as crime more widely is concerned, I'll tell you what I've noticed, and I've noticed it partly because, as you say, I've been a victim of it. I have noticed in very recent times, or relatively recent times, an uptick in the theft of mobile phones. And I had my mobile phone snatched from behind me by a man on I think an electric bike, a speed bike. I had no chance to defend myself. I had my dogs in my left hand, the leads of my dogs in the left hand, and I was typing a text message to my mother in the right hand. I wasn't paying attention, which I regret. And this man came up from behind me and snatched my mobile phone and sped off far more quickly on his bike than I was able to catch up with him. And that was a major inconvenience. And when you've been the victim of crime, it obviously gives you a certain perspective. And I shared that publicly. And in fact, Elon Musk shared a crying with laughter emoji in response to a post on his platform that mocked effectively, in my view, my experience, because it shared an earlier post in which I'd said I had never been a victim of mugging and didn't intend to be, I think. This is technically a mugging, but I had no chance to defend myself. But the point is, if I have friends coming to London, I will now advise them not to talk as on their mobile phones in the street, which anyway is not a particularly good idea because it risks you bumping into people. So I have noticed that. And I'm also aware, certainly, of a feeling of an uptick in shoplifting. Now, these are issues that as a Londoner, of course, I care about and I want something to be done about. And there's an extent to which Sadiq Khan is responsible for that because he has oversight, as I understand it, of the Metropolitan Police. But how the police function in our city and indeed other cities around the country is also a consequence to some extent of how much money is available to them, being made available to them by central government. So it is by no means Sadiq Khan's only responsibility.
Okay, Jan, let me ask you, I mean, do you feel unsafe walking down the street in London?
No, I don't. And I live in a mix between Afro-Caribbean. I mean, I moved from Kensington to south of London. Afro-Caribbean, somewhat Muslim, a few of the African nations based on the great restaurants. And I walk my dog. I'll walk my dog at 11 at night, midnight. No, I don't. But I know that I live in a safe neighborhood. I'm not going to go at that hour to a neighborhood that I know is unsafe. just like you don't go to the south side of Chicago because that's where all the killings and shootings happen.
Right. So, what do you think of Sadiq Khan's track record as mayor of London? As a woman who lives there, who's of American origin, I mean, what's your impression, Jan?
My impression is the same impression that I have of a lot of politicians that are in roles of leadership, is they can't control everything. They get blamed for the problems. It is the policies that can make their job harder. And you have to look at those things. I don't like to use judgmental words in that way, especially with politics, because we need to understand exactly what is really going on and what the complexities are. We're so quick to judge and label and say this is horrible. He's got problems. Have things improved? Are there things we object to? Like all these cameras that went up, and if you drive around London, you get charged. No, we don't like those policies. And I think if we looked at the policies more, we would understand where he has support and where he doesn't have support. But more importantly, is that would be the voice of the voters.
OK, so just to sum up, Jan, before we go to Matt, to give him a chance to have his closing remarks, because you did start. It sounds to me like, you know, your message to the rest of the world and to your president is that the mayor of London isn't so very bad that he warrants being called out at the UN General Assembly. I mean, does that roughly sum up?
The difference is that you are judging. You have made a judgment.
I'm not judging anyone.
Using the UN, the people who have made the judgment that because he said that at the UN Assembly, he therefore is horrible. Excuse me. No, because we're picking on the wrong thing. We're picking on the fact that he spoke out at a place where he maybe shouldn't have. Are you aware that he told King Charles Sadiq Khan could not come to the dinner for him? Did it dawn on people that Sadiq Khan is ticked off about that?
I'm aware of that.
They're baiting each other. That's what I just want people to look at what is presented to us and make their own decisions, but to not take things based out of context in the moment.
All right, Matt, let me give you the closing comments since you didn't open. Just to sort of wrap up this conversation, any final observations? And also, I'd like to ask you, I mean, even the Reform leader, Nigel Farage, he wouldn't expect to come springing to the defence of Mayor Sadiq Khan, seemed a little bit puzzled by these comments in New York. What are your sort of overall sort of closing comments here with regards to what's been the reaction in the political across the board?
First of all, just to give a bit of context on what seemed to be further supportive remarks on behalf of Donald Trump, what actually happened was on the aeroplane, I think, back to America, Trump bragged about having had Sadiq Khan banned from that state visit banquet. So that's also undignified for a president to be boasting about such a thing. And I've seen suggestions since that wasn't actually factually correct. And indeed, Sadiq Khan has said he wouldn't expect to be invited to such a banquet. In summary, what I would say is that can anyone watching really imagine another US president, a former US president, making the sort of personalized remarks that Donald Trump, and this is where I agree here, makes about all sorts of different figures. I agree it's not only Muslim mayors that he has targeted, but when he targets individuals in this way, it's pernicious. I think it's a form of bullying, and it also brings into disrepute the office of the President of the United States. Now, where his remarks about Sadiq Khan become even more sinister, in my view, is where there are undertones or overtones of Islamophobia. And I repeat in my closing remarks that when you single out a London mayor and describe him as terrible, which in my view is unpresidential language for a democratically elected politician in a country with which you are supposed to have a special relationship. When you describe him as terrible and in the next breath say that London has changed, and then go on to say immediately afterwards that they want Sharia law now, but they can't have it because it's not their country. It leaves, whatever your politics, it leaves me with the view that there are not many alternatives or other options other than to think that that is a form of deniable, and yes, it is deniable, Islamophobia by the President of the United States. And as a proud Londoner, I stand up for my mayor, and I don't agree with him on everything. I've already said that policing is something that is not just his responsibility, but the responsibility of others. But nonetheless, I want him scrutinised on it. But I stand up for my mayor, even if I don't agree with him on everything. And I also champion my city, despite its problems. It is a great city. Culture, sport, freedom, all sorts of amazing things. It's beautiful. Come to London if you have the chance. Maybe don't use your mobile phone out in public, but enjoy our great city and you'd be welcome. So long as you behave and are respectful yourselves, you will be welcome.
Well, dog walking in London has come up in this conversation twice. Both of you seem to walk dogs around the city, and perhaps you'll bump into each other. And can continue the conversation with the dog leads in hand. Thank you very much. You've had the last word, Matt Stadlen. Thank you very much indeed. And thanks as ever, Jan Halper-Hayes. Thanks for joining us once again here on Arabiya English.